So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Lauren Connolly and I'm the Scholarships Manager for the General Sir John Monash Foundation. Thank you for being here tonight, and hello to anyone who's watching the recording of tonight's session. Hopefully quite a few of you here tonight would have joined us for our last session, which was a few weeks ago. That covered more of the general information about the scholarship. But if you did miss it, the recorded version is available now to watch on our website and also our YouTube account. And just like last time, we will be recording tonight's session as well. It'll also be uploaded to our YouTube page in the coming days. And once it's up, I will email around a recording of the session just like I did last time, so you won't miss it. So I'll start tonight with an acknowledgement of country. The office of the General Sir John Monash Foundation sits on Wurundjeri country, which is also where I'm signing on from today to this webinar. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands in which we're privileged to have our working base and pay my respects to the Wurundjeri elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners across this vast continent on which our scholars, supporters, board members and staff call home, and where we often meet as a national organisation. Tonight's webinar is the final part of our two-part series that we conduct each year about the scholarship and the application process. The focus of tonight's session will be hearing from our scholars and also giving you, the audience, a chance to do a Q&A session with the scholars and staff, but we'll also just do a quick recap of the scholarship and our selection criteria before we jump into that. You can post questions in the chat throughout the session, but we'll also give you the opportunity to use your microphones to ask a question in the Q&A part of the session, but just please keep your microphones muted until then. So as I mentioned earlier, my name's Lauren. I'm the Scholarships Manager and I oversee and manage the application and selection process for our scholarships. With me again tonight is Dr. Karen McConalogue, our Executive Director of the John Monash Foundation Leadership Academy. Karen will be assisting me to monitor the chat throughout the session just to see if there's a quick question to respond to, but you'll also get the chance to ask her some questions later on. We've also got 4 of our scholars with us tonight from our most recent scholar cohorts. So joining us are Daniela, Hamish and Max from our 2025 cohort, and they went through the application process last year. And Danny, Hamish and Max will begin their programs in the UK in a few months' time, which I'm sure they're very excited for. And then towards the end of tonight's session, we'll be joined by one of our 2024 scholars, Nick Felstead. He's just finished his Master of Laws at Columbia University in New York. But because he is still in New York, it's very early in the morning for him right now. So we're just giving him a small sleep in and then he'll join us at the end of the session. All right, so let's just do a quick recap of our minimum eligibility requirements that you'll need in order to apply. You will need to be an Australian citizen to be eligible for the scholarship. You'll need to have already completed, or at least will complete by the end of this year, an undergraduate degree from an Australian university. You'll also need to be planning to commence your postgraduate study at some point in 2026. So any programs that are commencing later this year are not eligible for this upcoming round of scholarships. And just a reminder too, that you would not be able to hold a Rhodes, Fulbright or Ramsay scholarship at the same time as John Monash scholarship. And then just a quick reminder of our scholarship selection criteria as well. So John Monash scholars demonstrate academic excellence, outstanding leadership potential, and have a strong vision to build Australia's capabilities for the future, which are all based on the qualities modelled by General Sir John Monash. So to be successful in your application, you'll need to demonstrate excellence through academic or professional examples, leadership through demonstrated leadership examples in different environments, and citizenship, which is how to plan to make a positive impact on and contribute to Australia and society more broadly. Importantly, you need to be able to argue the merits of your chosen course and university and how they're best positioned to drive progress in your field of study. And then, sorry, I've just accidentally hit the scroll button. Just a quick recap of this year's selection process as well. So as of today, we're just over halfway through the application window for 2026 scholarships. And applications do close on the 30th of June at 5 p.m. And that is a hard deadline on that as well. So we usually receive around 350 applications in total during this window. From there, we'll be inviting around 100 applicants to the first round of interviews, and those interviews are held around the country with panels of guests from ranges of disciplines, and those will be scheduled in September. And after that first round of interviews is complete, around 40 applicants will be invited to progress to the national round of interviews, and those are held in October in Sydney and Melbourne. And then finally, each year between 14 and 20 extraordinary applicants will be awarded a John Monash Scholarship, and notification of that will come at the end of the year. So our application portal is currently open, and so I'm assuming most of you here tonight have at least registered for an account and opened an application to have a look at the questions and requirements. I think I can hear, I don't know if there's some slight feedback. All good. So I'm assuming most of you have had a look at the application questions already. So once you register and make an account, there are some pre-qualification questions that you'll have to answer that just relate to that minimum entry criteria to make sure that you are eligible. So an example of that would be just confirming that you are Australian citizen. And once you've answered those questions, you'll be able to proceed to the application form. So on the screen, I've put a list together of the main sections of the application form. Some of those sections might require you to answer questions in the form of a personal statement, and other sections will require you to upload supporting documents like your CV or academic transcripts, which we'll get into in a bit further detail on a later slide. Most of the questions and sections are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll just call out a couple of things to be aware of. So the postgraduate study proposal section is all about providing the details of the program that you'd like to use the scholarship for and why you've chosen it. So I've just highlighted a couple of questions to explain a little bit more. So the first highlighted question is, have you already applied to your proposed program? Now, it's not a requirement for you to have applied for the program already, but this question does give you the chance to tell us more about your preparations for study. So depending on your answer, you'll be asked a different follow-up question. So if you answer yes, I have already applied, like in this example, you'll be asked about the status of that application. So maybe you've already been given an offer for the program last year, but you decided to defer or to not commence. Maybe you've applied for the program before, but you were unsuccessful, but it taught you that you needed some kind of prerequisite knowledge to apply again. So those are all examples of the kind of response that you would put in that section. If you were to answer, no, I haven't applied before, you'll be asked what research you've done about entry requirements, timings, or any other relevant admissions information, like maybe that an audition is required. And so that's your chance to tell us about what you've researched about the course, that you've checked that you've got the prerequisite knowledge. If you're applying for something like a mid-career kind of program, like an MBA, that you've checked that you have the required amount of work experience, or if you're applying for a PhD, maybe you've been reaching out to potential supervisors. So the information here will vary depending on your chosen program, but that's just a way for you to demonstrate your preparations for study. So I just wanted to call out that this question's not trying to catch you out. It's just trying to give you the opportunity to tell us how you're preparing to embark on this study. So the second highlighted question in this screenshot is a chance for you to nominate a second choice of program. So having a plan B is a really good thing for a number of reasons. Sometimes you might not get an offer for that first program that you've nominated, and this does happen for our scholars. It's not unusual. Also, you might put in a second option if you're tossing up between two different universities or two different programs that would be equally beneficial to you. Or if you are one of the applicants interested in studying in the US, but you're a little uncertain with the current status of student visas at the moment, if studying next year is feasible, so you might list a second option in a different country. So I think it's a really good thing for a number of reasons to have that second program prepared and to talk about it in your application, just to ensure that you have a range of options. So the application form only asks for those top two preferences. That's not to say you can't have more than that. It's just that there wouldn't be a section in the application to talk about them, but having more than two options is also perfectly acceptable and often recommended. So the other section that I wanted to call out is in the professional and leadership experience section. Because the scholarship is open to all study fields, we understand that that means that applicants will be applying with a range of different professional backgrounds, and what success or achievement looks like in certain disciplines might vary from other disciplines. And so we've included these two highlighted questions, which are optional to respond to, by the way, but just as a way for you to list any relevant achievements or awards or recognition that you think are important to you, or important reflection of your career to date. So I raised this because I was asked a question about from a candidate about whether they could include any grants or fellowships or other scholarships that they've been awarded in this section. And yes, that would be appropriate to put in here. So anything you've done in the community or activities outside of a workplace can also be entered in the section, just as much as work achievements can be entered in here as well. So the purpose is for it to be open-ended, just to give you space to highlight what's important to know about you to the application reviewers. So in addition to answering the application questions, you'll need to provide some supporting documents in your application as well. So that includes your resume. You'll also need to provide official academic transcripts for any completed study, but also any study that you're currently doing that's incomplete. You can provide a transcript for that as well. You'll need to request letters of recommendation from 3 references who know you in academic, professional, or personal capacities. But those letters would be provided directly to the foundation in a separate referee portal. A couple of things on your referees. The first is I'd recommend that you ask them to complete their part a few days before the final deadline. So I've been saying the 26th of June is a good date, and that just means there's less of a chance of them causing delays for your application. And you have a couple of days after they've submitted their part to just do any final touches before you submit the application. The second thing to note for anyone who has a reference that works in the defense industry or another secure type of industry, our application systems just sometimes has issues with sending emails to email addresses with heavy-duty firewalls. Defense was one of those examples that we had experienced issues with last year. So just for that reason, where possible, a personal email address for that referee rather than a work email address, just so your reference actually receives the emails that the system is trying to send, because we did have a few issues last year. But if your referees, if that's not relevant to them, then that's fine. I just wanted to call that out as well. And finally, you'll also need to complete a budget plan, for which we provided a template. And that just demonstrates how you plan to manage your finances for the duration of your study. So as I've written there on the slide, a well-prepared budget can eventually become a tool for when you're preparing to leave for your studies. So it's good to put a bit of effort into completing it, because it can really help you beyond the application as well. All right. So I went through in the first webinar some of my tips that I've picked up over the last year. But tonight we're actually going to hear from our scholars who went through the process last year about their tips for the application. So we have with us at the moment Danny, Hamish, and Max. Maybe Danny, because you're first on the screen, I might ask you first if you had any application tips after submitting your application last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, and hello to everyone who's listening. Um, I remember the application process being really daunting. Part of it was, I guess, the thought of, is this the right time in life? And it is quite an extensive application to put together, and to actually sit down and go through that was quite a lot of work. But I also found it daunting because it made me really, really consider exactly what did I want out of this scholarship opportunity, and therefore my career in the future. So my major tip would be to give yourself enough time to really, really consider what you're hoping to gain from the scholarship, um, and to consider really what your contribution to the country that you would like to advocate for in your application as well. Um, a lot of people said it afterwards, but I actually found, beyond being an application for a direct goal, I found the application process actually really, really great in clarifying what direction I wanted to take in the next few years of my career. So giving yourself the time to really think about it and reflect on it and go back and edit, etc., is really important.
Great, thanks, Danny. Hamish, can I throw to you any application tips?
Absolutely. And I'm pretty much going to just reaffirm what Daniela said as well. I think the most important thing from start to finish is having clarity over your vision. And essentially, it's the art of being able to really clearly communicate what and where you plan on studying, why you've chosen that course, and most importantly, how this will enable you to contribute to Australia in your chosen field. And you can only do that if you have strong clarity yourself and have really considered and reflected on what's motivating you and the challenges you might encounter as well. Everyone goes about that reflection process in a different way. I found it a useful exercise to write up quite detailed 5, 10, 20-year plans. Others find it useful to present their vision to their friends or family. Conversations with your references is a great opportunity as well to really work through that in detail. But make the time to do that deep thinking before you start trying to craft your answers, and the writing will flow much easier. And yeah, it will enable you to present a really consistent, clear thread. Even though the questions are different, you can still really throw through them, all the different components of the application. And quickly, I would also reaffirm Lauren's advice to get underway as soon as possible.
Thanks, Hamish. Out of curiosity, when did you submit your application last year?
I actually can't remember. I was thinking about that then, but I was mainly concerned with my references. So giving them the time, and I could not advocate more for having a really good detailed discussion with your references about it. I found that such a useful process when writing my own part of the application, was talking them through it as well.
Great advice. Thanks, guys. And then Max, finally, did you have any other application tips that you wanted to share?
Yes, I think Daniela and Hamish have done a great job of sort of speaking to having that clarity before going into the writing. And I think just to bounce off of that, a structure that I think helped me, that I really reiterated throughout the written application, but also onward into the interviews, was having these 4 points, which was the first being sort of what are the big questions or problems in your field that you're aiming to sort of attack, or that motivate you, like Daniela was saying. And then secondly, so what's the sort of the knowledge barrier? And I sort of think about this in terms of a STEM background that's in the way to sort of a solution or advancement in that field. And then third of all, I sort of tried to integrate then, of course, the point about how will your proposed study plans fit into this and actually help bridge this gap in knowledge. And then fourth, I think, which was a useful thing to consider when writing the application and in that clear narrative is how will you actually reintegrate into Australia and bring what you've learned from this study back into this more local context to actually solve or get nearer to solving the problem you set out to.
Thanks, Max. Okay, so I think I might just ask a couple more questions to you guys specifically about the application. But I might just sort of pick and choose someone to respond. So my first question is that, so we've talked about a little earlier the selection themes for this scholarship, which are leadership, citizenship, and excellence. Maybe Hamish, do you have memory of how you talked about those things or how you address those things in your application?
I think they're a really good opportunity for you to structure your whole application around because these questions are quite broad. So having something you can tie everything back to is important. And again, on that kind of reflection piece before you start writing, yes, there is criteria that the selection panel is looking for, but you need to be clear on what those values mean to you as well. And that's going to help you be able to write about them. For me, talking to my references about those specific values was a really useful opportunity to explore them all in depth. And I guess, unlike probably a lot of scholars, my strengths were not in the excellence category. I was more weighted towards the citizenship side. So it was finding ways to, I guess, balance it all together and be able to express things throughout. Everyone has their strengths and areas that they're improving on or working on, and that's okay. And you can recognize that as well, I think, in your application. But there'll be things that to you are so kind of second nature, you don't even realize they are a form of leadership or excellence. And the opportunity to talk to someone like a reference or a family member or a friend, and they can help draw some of those things out as well. But yeah, for me, it's I tried to tie all the answers in some way back to those three core criteria and values.
Thanks, Hamish. Maybe this next one I'll ask Max because we get a lot of questions about referees. And I've just been looking at the chat, by the way, and there's a few that I will try to respond to. But I did notice, I think there was a question about referees as well. So, Max, who were your references in your application and how did you settle on choosing them?
Yeah, so I suppose ultimately I chose my references just by playing to my strengths. So in the end, I had two more academic references, the first being my direct supervisor for my honours thesis, and the second being an associate supervisor to my honours thesis and someone that I'd done some extra work with along the track. And then my third was more of a professional type of reference that wasn't necessarily academic, that I'd sort of worked with professionally and I thought could speak to my capacity for leadership, I suppose. And so I thought that that would be a good third reference as opposed to being, I guess, being in STEM, I'm more inclined to use all academic references. So people that I've, studied with, whether they be my course coordinators or whether I've done research projects with them before. But I thought that it'd be good to have someone that can speak to the leadership side of my application. So that's why I chose the fourth to be someone that I'd worked with in sort of a leadership academy setting before. But once more, it was more just playing to my own strengths, the three that I thought could help across the board hit the excellence, leadership, and citizenship criterion.
Yeah. Thanks, Max. And just out of curiosity for Danny, Max, or we've just heard from Max, but maybe Danny or Hamish, did either of you have an example of a personal reference in your application, or did you choose academic and professional references?
I can speak to this if you'd like.
Mhm.
I actually found my references incredibly difficult to choose. So for reference, like, sorry, that no pun intended. I work as a clinical doctor at the moment, but part of my whole application was transitioning into a non-clinical public health role, and I had no references for which that was relevant to. So I found it really difficult. Therefore, I did, and I also didn't really have much of an academic relevant experience within the past few years. So I felt quite challenged by my references. So I did choose a personal reference, someone who I had volunteered with quite closely for a number of years throughout uni, who was able to speak to my kind of citizenship capabilities and my leadership within those different philanthropic roles. And so I found that really actually beneficial to be able to have someone who wasn't necessarily just in the workplace or the academic field.
Thanks, Danny. And Hamish, how about you?
Yeah, I was similar to Danny as well. I didn't have an academic reference. I'd done my bachelor's, but I didn't have a supervisor during those talk courses. So there wasn't anyone I felt who could appropriately really talk to the things that mattered the most in my application. So I had one personal reference who was, I guess, a friend and a mentor who I'd known for a long time, and I guess they focused on the character side of things. Then I had a professional reference who really talked specifically about my particular field, and then I had I guess, someone who was at the intersection of both, someone I consider a mentor, um, but a mentor in a very professional sense. And for me, like that was the opportunity to really talk about vision and where I wanted to take things. So um, yeah, I think take the time to think about what's going to work best for you. Um, and it is that that is a really important decision and really important component of the application, so it's worthwhile. And some people, it's okay, they're just like too busy to be able to put together the kind of reference you need them to be able to put together. And even if that's frustrating in the moment, it's best actually to find someone who has the time to really put a lot of effort into it.
Thanks, guys. And so I hope that sort of provides a bit of further context for anyone who's sort of asking about specific referee scenarios, that it's really thinking about what you're hoping that person might say about you, or what the relationship they have with you might support something in particular that you're writing into your application. But if you do have a specific person and you can describe their relationship, but you're not sure if it's a appropriate reference, you can always send me an email at scholarships@johnmonash.com, and we can discuss. It's just better that you give me more time before the deadline. But yeah, I'm happy to take that question offline over email as well. Okay, and so then I think my final question for this sort of portion of the Q&A, I'd like to hear from each of you about how you chose the university and the program that you are now going to study. Hamish, you're still on my screen, so maybe you can start.
No worries, Lauren. I'll be brief. I chose my course in university. It was probably almost a year before I'd started the scholarship application. And I was pretty committed to further study and had this massive spreadsheet of courses that I'd looked at, and that process in itself was quite time consuming. It's quite fun though, to be honest, seeing what's out there and just getting down all the details. And through that, the most important thing to me was picking the course that best set me up for the future and also met the kind of things I wanted out of it, which for me, I wanted a taught component alongside the research component. and that helped me actually narrow things down. Some people I know like are really interested in living in a specific country and they might know a specific language, and that's an awesome opportunity. I didn't have those kinds of factors. It was really just looking at the course before the university for me and finding the best possible one, which eventually led me to my Masters of Science at Oxford.
Thanks, Hamish. Danny?
Yeah, so I applied to the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and really I have been so interested in this particular university since I started med school, so about a decade. It's kind of the hub of public health within the world, and lots of people that I had met who were doing wonderful things within Public Health Australia and overseas had all either attended this university or knew people who had attended and couldn't speak more highly of it. So to be honest, I found out about the John Monash Scholarship when a friend of a family, like a relative of a friend, was awarded it in 2014, I think. And it had always been on my mind of wouldn't it be incredible to go overseas and study with the John Monash Scholarship at this university. And what really pushed me to apply this round was that they released this new Masters in Climate Change and Planetary Health only a year before. And so it was a new course. It was exactly what I was interested in, what I found to be really pivotal part of healthcare. And I just thought this is the perfect time to apply at this university that I've heard so much about, but specifically in a course that now seemed incredibly relevant to what I want to be doing within healthcare in Australia. So it was probably a culmination of long-term dream, and then a really relevant and exciting course, which led me to choose my master's.
Thanks, Danny. And I think Max will end on you, but I think you have sort of an interesting bit to talk about when it comes to choosing programs in universities.
Yeah, so I had a quite iterative process with choosing, like landing on my final course. So I did a bachelor's in physics, and so I've always known for a long time I wanted to do a PhD. But the type of PhD I wanted to do is only sort of crystallized right at the time that I was sort of submitting the John Monash application. So I was speaking to my supervisor and trying to understand who are the best supervisors internationally and projects that might suit my interests in sort of this intersection between quantum technologies and biology. And so at the time of submitting my application, I thought I'd found the best option in Germany, and I was really happy with it. But as I kept continuing those discussions and actually meeting with more researchers overseas and speaking to them and getting a lay of the land, that my first preference had actually changed by the time I got to an interview. And so then I was also really set on a particular project and supervisor in a different institution in Germany that had sort of evolved and started pitching instead during the interview phase. But then ultimately, it was actually my second preference that I landed on once I'd received the John Monash Scholarship. And that was through a very quite long period of self-reflection, just crystallizing the sort of research that I want to do going into the future. For me, it was basically the divide between pure and applied. And so my first and second preferences were sort of on opposite ends of the spectrum between pure and applied physics. And so at the end, I had to make a final judgment call as to what I wanted to commit to. But it ended up being a more applied project at the University of Oxford.
Thanks, Max. All right, so I think now we'll move into a bit more of a Q&A about a range of other topics as well. What I'd like to cover off first is some of the questions that I received offline from people who weren't able to make it. So we might cover off a few of those in sort of a rapid fire question and answer, and maybe Karen can help me out with that. And then we can sort of open it up to the floor. So just give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and I'll get those questions up. So a couple of the technical questions here, which are sort of about specific areas of the application form. So the first question here is, given that the scholarship includes an allowance for flights, should we still include the cost of flights in our budget? So I think, yes, you should. So the travel allowance that this person's talking about, which is in addition to the scholarship that we award, it contributes to one return trip to and from your study destination. So if you're planning to study for a longer duration, maybe more than 1 or 2 years, maybe you're thinking about traveling around for holidays, or if you're planning on visiting family for Christmas in 1 year, those trips would obviously be at your own expense. So I think it's good to have an understanding of the cost of flights as part of your budget research, because you may not end up taking only 1 or 2 flights for your study. So yes, definitely include it in your budget allowance. Second question, is it possible or necessary to include hyperlinks in our application? For example, if citing a statistic. And to that, it's not necessary to include hyperlinks in the application. I'm assuming, in those long form text responses when you have a lot of formatting options. And I'm not sure I'd recommend using hyperlinks either. Typically, your application reviewers will want to read and assess the content and documents that you provided in your application, and having to follow links to other sites to compare or validate your words is a bit time consuming. And also, if something goes wrong, like there's a broken link, there's no way for them to communicate back to you about that. So I think if you do think it's important to cite something as part of your application, maybe just choose a citation method like Harvard or MLA that a reviewer could choose to validate if they wish, but otherwise I don't think hyperlinks are necessary, and I wouldn't recommend using those formatting options. Unfortunately, we can't switch them off, so they are there, but don't feel like you have to use them. The third question here is, and I think maybe I saw a couple of them online in the chat as well. So if you are successful in the scholarship but unsuccessful in gaining an offer from your first or second preference program, will you have to resubmit an application to justify why the program you end up getting into still fits into the criteria of the scholarship? Would love to know more about the general process if you receive a no from a university. So it is, when this happens, it's sort of assessed on a case-by-case basis, as obviously that's the programs that you want to study are quite an individual thing. So there's not sort of a hard and fast rule, but I will say that if scholars aren't accepted into their first or second choice of program, I work with them, and Karen helps out as well, to help them get accepted into other options that are still suitable for funding. And we also have an academic review panel as well at the foundation, which helps with that process as well. So we do explain more about the exact process after we award the scholarship. So it's not anything that you have to particularly worry about right now. We wouldn't require a full new application, but just we'd have to do some discussion to make sure that any new program that you're thinking about is still going to help you achieve those aims and objectives that you talked about in your original application. And it does happen with every cohort. It's not a new thing. The nature of applying for these competitive programs is that not everybody gets an offer. And so having those backup options prepared to give us more choice is a great idea. And yeah, it happens every year. This next question, could you please share more information about the letter of recommendation prompt? Is it just a general letter of recommendation that can be adapted from the one they are also writing for my postgraduate study application, or does it have to be tailored to the values and objectives of the Monash program? So what we do ask is for your referee to talk about you in the context of our broad selection criteria. So leadership, excellence, and citizenship. So I'm not sure if you could use or repurpose a letter of reference used for like university admission, because you might have to talk about different things. So when we email the referee to let them know that they've been nominated by you, we just include the links to the scholarships pages on our website, where it shows them what our selection criteria is, and we ask them to frame their reference letter in the context of that selection criteria. And then maybe Karen could help me with this this final one, which was interesting. We might have to take it offline for this person, but what are some of the common pitfalls applicants fall into when applying? For example, what would you recommend us not to do when writing our application responses?
Oh, yeah, interesting question because we fund in every discipline, we see very like the applications are all very different from each other. I think you want to be able to back up what you say. It would be something I'd say. If you're making a whole bunch of unsubstantiated comments that I excel at this and whatever, there needs to be something to show that in terms of you've got the skills, the training, awards to support that. So I'd say don't make sure you can substantiate what you're saying is something I'd say. But yeah, I don't think it's not the specific things to say, oh, don't do this or you must do that, because everyone's different, and that's just all part of the process as well. But yeah, make sure and be clear, I think, is another thing. Don't just read your own work. I'd sort of definitely get other people to read over your work. So what you think might be clear might not be clear to other people. So that's always a good way to make sure that you're getting your message across.
Cool. And I'm just scanning through the chat now for any questions that are sort of in this more technical.
Yeah, can I can jump to one. I thought
Yes,
it might be best to discuss it because there might be other people in the situation. So for the WAM calculation, the weighted average mean, someone asked, what do you do if your university only provides letter grades? So you've got effectively a band rather than a specific score. Would you like them just to pick the median mark in the
Yes, the
like if it's
midpoint of that band, and then use that to calculate your average.
okay? Let me see what I haven't. I've been trying to answer some. Some are quite specific. Um, the sort of questions around, some of those sort of bigger questions around, what would your contribution to Australia look like? So I've put some suggestions in there, but again, that will be different for everybody. It might be that you want to help close the gap with First Nations people in health. It might be that you want to be part of law reform. You want to be part of policy. It might be that you have ambitions in politics. It can be lots and lots of things. So there's no right or wrong answer, but what you do need to explain is how doing this degree that you want to do with this scholarship, how is that going to help you get there? How does that help upskill you for that ambition and impact that you want to have? Just let me see if there's a few other I haven't got to, Lauren. They're still pouring in.
This is a quick one. I've already been accepted into the program I'd like to study, but I've deferred my acceptance to officially start in 2026. Is this okay? Yes, that's okay. You can have an offer, but as long as the program starts in 2026, then it's eligible for this current round of scholarships.
Yeah. Let's see what else we haven't got to.
There's also this one as well. We get this from time to time. So there are different scholarships: Victorian Government, John Monash Scholarship, Rio Tinto, John Monash Scholarship. Is this just by name only, or should we try to cater our application to a set of awards? So Karen, do you want to talk about that one a little bit?
Sorry, say again. Do we?
The different, so you know how we name our scholarships after different supporters. Yeah. Should anyone try to cater their application to that in a particular way, or no?
No. I mean, there's some that are for funding specific areas, and others are flexible. So it kind of is what it is. We will allocate the scholarship to you based on what it is that you're planning to do. So, for example, we've got a business scholarship, so that will go to someone that's asked to do an MBA or another business course. But it doesn't, it doesn't mean only apply for MBAs because that scholarship exists, because all the other ones fund different things as well, or they just fund generally. So you'll be matched to the scholarship depending on your areas of interest. So there's not really any way to make your application more structured towards one of them or any advantage in doing so. Yeah.
And we don't award all available named scholarships each year because it is dependent on the pool of applicants that we have. So if we don't have someone studying business, then we would not award a business scholarship in a given year.
That's true. One question I haven't got to yet, and someone's thumbed up, they want to know the answer to, is can you change your university course once you've received the scholarship if it's not included as one of your choices? So if you were to go to a third option that wasn't listed, became your first option, I guess.
Yeah, it is possible. And again, that's something that we'd explain the process of that after the award of scholarships. What I'd be letting you know, it still has to be in the same broad area of what the preferences were that you mentioned in your application. It would still have to be helping you achieve, your career objectives or your contribution to Australia that you talked about in your application. And the thing I'd note as well is that if your program of choice or the one that you haven't mentioned in your application is a significantly longer duration, we would not be able to give more funding. The funding is awarded to you based on what that first preference is in your application. So if it's a 1-year master's, you get a 1-year scholarship. If you end up saying, I'd now like to do a PhD program, you can. It's just that we couldn't change your scholarship to be a 3-year scholarship for that. You've been awarded a 1-year scholarship. So just be aware of that.
Another question was, can you only apply once? The answer is no. Many of our scholars get their application up on their second or even third attempt. We encourage, and Lauren gives feedback to applicants as well to help them redo that. Another question, Taylor asked, will it be detrimental if you haven't done your undergrad at a top Australian university, such as the University of Sydney or Melbourne?
No, we don't give any preference to the university that you studied at. It just has to be an Australian university.
See if I think I've answered some of these. Can your second preference be 2 1-year master's programs if the top preference is a joint program per the requirements? I think what we're doing is 2 1-year master's programs. Might need to clarify what we see as one program, Lauren, versus two separate programs.
Yeah, so the scholarship is the purpose of it is to fund one program. So sometimes if a university offers a dual program, so you can look into Oxford does a 1+1, which is a 1-year master plus a 1-year master at a different school or related, that requires one admission and one enrollment. So we would consider that as one program, but 2 separate 1-year masters that would require you to apply again for that second master, we would consider as 2 separate degrees. So that would not be eligible for a 2-year scholarship. So I think I'll just see if I have. I just wanted to check, Karen, maybe you could check if Nick has joined us, but I might just, because we've got the scholars here, I want to sort of circle back to some of the less technical stuff, which, by the way, more than happy if we don't get to them to take those questions offline. You can just email us at scholarships@John Monash with any of those technical questions, and I'm happy to get back to you. But just with, sort of zooming out a little bit, and maybe we'll ask some of our 2025 scholars. Someone did ask, is there anything that we can do as candidates to distinguish ourselves in our application? And I was wondering, for the 25 scholars, is there anything that you included in your application last year that you thoughtfully included because you thought it was something that set you apart?
I can start us off.
Yeah.
So I think I had just coming off of being in the middle of my honors thesis project at the end of a bachelor's in physics. I did come from the more sort of academic side, and I didn't have as many sort of leadership experiences or service sort of to pitch in my application. So I think how I tried to set myself apart was to um, really sell my enthusiasm and how excited I was for the research that I wanted to conduct now and into the future. And so I think I just went probably overboard in just like discussing all of the exciting fronts and technologies and things that I think might spin out of these different types of labs and advancements. And so I think that's maybe one thing that helped in my case. And I think certainly when it came to the interview, being really prepared with um, just to show your enthusiasm and why you truly care for what you're trying to learn more about.
Great response. Danny or Hamish, did you have anything that you might have done to set you apart?
I don't know if it set me apart, but I remember when I was putting my application in, I kept wondering how relevant is, say, my volunteering or community work if it's not been completely related to what I'm applying for here. And so I think I wasn't sure if, say, like my friend and I help set up a community garden and do other things, and like, is that the value of a John Monash scholar or not? But I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to present my full self, and if I am awarded a scholarship with that, then excellent, and if not, I've just been honest and transparent, and so I think, yeah, just being able to think, I am a collection of experiences, not just a transcript or a piece of paper. And how can I present that to the board and show them that all of these different life experiences and things I care about all culminating into this application? I think that was maybe potentially relevant to that question.
Yeah. Thanks, Danny. Any thoughts, Hamish? All good if not.
I would affirm both of what Danny and Max said and let your passion shine through in your answers. The panel really want to see that you are deeply care and motivated by what you're doing. It's okay to be nerdy about it and to really lean into it. And I think even if you don't have specific achievements or awards or experiences that you think set you apart, your vision, and I guess this is kind of what Max touched on, is your vision, and that in and of itself is a distinguishing piece. So if you're really clear on that and yeah, really lean into that, that's an opportunity as well, I think.
Cool. Thanks, guys. And then I'll just jump back because I got a couple of questions in advance, and I can see a couple of questions in the chat about US universities, which are all sort of related. So I'll read out one question and then I'll hopefully give a response that addresses a lot of the questions. So this question is, how is the foundation approaching applications for prospective students hoping to study in the US, either at Harvard or at another university, given the recent turmoil surrounding international student applications? How should prospective students approach this in their applications? And maybe I'll have a go, but maybe Karen can jump in as well. So as far as we're concerned this year, it's a normal application round. We are still accepting applications for anyone who wants to study in the US. What I might encourage you to think about, in addition to preparing the application, but just sort of having a think to yourself about a few scenarios. One would be if you do end up receiving a scholarship, but the Harvard situation deteriorates and the ban on their student visas is upheld, what backup options are you considering? Because I'm assuming you would still want to start study in 2026. A second question might be, are those backup options, are you as equally as happy with them as you were with the program at Harvard? Are those backup options also located in the US? Because we're not sure at the moment. Just watching the Harvard situation, it could be extended to other universities, and it'll probably be a watch and wait situation. But are your backup options also in the US? And so, if worst case scenario, the ban was spread across a number of different universities in the US, how would you feel about that? And you might not be able to study next year if that was the case. And also, let's say that you can get a student visa. Just sort of observing Harvard being in the news and the media, and a bit of the uncertainty. What's your level of comfort with studying at somewhere like Harvard, just given the confusion for international students? I think it's hard to say what will or won't happen, but what we are saying is that we're not going to disadvantage anyone who wants to study in the US, but you just have to think about your comfort level and what your backup options are, because if you can't start study but you get the scholarship, how would you like to manage that situation? So Karen, I don't know if you want to jump in with anything else on that topic.
We've got Nick joining us, so those that can stay on at around. Oh gosh, Nick says in the web, but sorry, I've been too busy typing. I'll let Nick in. He's here. Nick can speak a little bit firsthand from someone that's been who's literally at Columbia. But I think it is important to note. I'd advise anyone thinking about going to the US to read the DFAT website in terms of the warnings. Just you need to be really sure that you understand and have a level of comfort. Things like your personal devices can be taken and screened, your mobile phone, your laptop. You need to be clear that you have no, that there's no criminal convictions. There's a whole lots of reasons why they've always been there, but they're being particularly vigilant around some of these right now. So I'd say to anyone, have a look at the DFAT website if you're thinking about the US and say, I'm okay with this. Things like don't get involved in student protests. If that's something you would normally do, you're probably going to want to rethink that if you want to go to the US, because if you've seen what's happened to some of the students there. Laura and I met with a immigration attorney as part of a thing organised by the Australian American Association a few mornings ago, and certainly it was it's not all panic stations. I think some stuff has been hyped up in the media, but I think you certainly want to make an informed decision to make sure it's something that you are comfortable with, or have other options as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry to put him on the spot, but welcome, Nick, if you have joined us.
Yes.
Good morning, should I say.
Nick, would you like to comment a bit as someone that's sort of been? Well, I mean, you're lucky because you're on the you've just finished
Just graduated.
Yeah. But do you want to talk a little bit about what it's like being an international student in the US right now?
Yeah, sure. I think I just got the end of what you were saying, Karen, and I think in terms of being concerned about coming into the country and having your phones checked and stuff. It's sort of like I think I would think of it as being like, when you go to London or a big European city, you could be pickpocketed, but as long as you're not like waving your phone around like an idiot, you're probably not going to be. Like I haven't heard of anyone that's had an issue flying into the country. I haven't heard of any, sorry, I should say any Australians that have had issues coming into the country, any Australians that have had issues with their student visas being revoked. However, that's obviously not the case for anyone. And I think for a lot of my friends at the law school and who are studying, public policy and things of that nature, we do know people or have friends of friends that are more directly impacted by the current administration's pretty like shocking policy agenda and by their actions. So I think if I was speaking to Lauren and Karen about this the other week, but if I was in your position and thinking about whether to go to the US or go instead to the UK or Europe or South America or Asia or literally anywhere but the US, I would probably think seriously about that. Because you just never know what's going to happen the next day here. It seems like every day something new and exciting is happening. But having said that as well, when you're applying, or I mean, I assume for most of the people applying for the John Monash scholarship, you haven't started thinking about whether you want to apply for postgraduate study today or on November 5th last year. You've probably been thinking about this for a while, and if going to UCLA or going to Harvard or going to some other university in the US has been on your like research bucket list and part of your, I guess, like career and academic journey and path for some time. It's still here, and the universities are still here. And I think how can I say this? I think give it real consideration, and yeah, as Karen said, think just be smart about like what you do while you're here. Don't do something if this isn't you to that would rock the boat unnecessarily. But yeah, I think I've probably rambled a bit. This is the first thing I've said all day.
Thank you, Nick. And again, sorry to put you on the spot.
That's right.
For everyone's context, Nick's just finished up his Master of Laws, so congratulations. And you are going to be staying on in New York for a bit, right? Is there anything that you can tell us about your plans? Just because I did notice there was a question in the chat about the need for returning to Australia immediately post-study, or even talking about that. But I think you might have an interesting perspective on that in particular.
Yeah, sure. So I think when if you get the scholarship, I assume in about March next year, there'll be a conference in Canberra and you'll meet all the other scholars from your cohort, which I'm sure it's already been said by the others, but that was just like the best couple of days ever. It was incredible. And all the people that are applying and end up getting the scholarship are fantastic. And I think we were all sort of like skirting around this for the first day, and then by the end of the first day, start of the second day, we kind of realized that we'd all said we're coming back to Australia like immediately the day after graduation. Um, but in reality, all of us probably wanted to use the opportunity to stick around and either travel for a bit or just experience living overseas, work overseas, whether it be in the country that you're studying in or elsewhere. So um, I think I certainly said that I was coming back straight away, even though that wasn't necessarily my intention. Now, having been in the US, it is my intention to come back as soon as I realistically can after another 12 months here. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't worry about feeling like you need to say you have to come back to Australia as soon as possible. People um, there are Monash scholars that have been here for well over a decade, and there are lots of ways to contribute to Australia without actually, sitting in an office in Canberra or Sydney.
Yeah, completely agreed.
Lauren, may I add to that at all?
Oh, please do, Danny.
Yeah. So I actually, in my application, talked about my want to stay longer and just explored that within my application, because part of my rationale for going to this particular place was the country it was located in. And so, like directly addressing it in your application if you think it's completely relevant, or you think that then maybe that work experience or other opportunities surrounding or following your study might be helpful. It's worth explore. I found it worth exploring there, and I was also asked about it in one of the interviews as well, given that was in my application. So I found it useful to just be upfront about my plans.
Thanks, Danny. And Nick, how much can you say about what your plans are for the next 12 months?
I can tell you what I'm doing for 9 months because
Yep.
3 months is still TBD. But yeah, so if you're thinking about going to the US, you'll most likely be going on an F1 visa unless you're a citizen, in which case you don't have to worry about any of this any of the visa issues. You might still have to worry about some immigration issues, as you've probably seen on the news. But anyway, F1 visa uh, gives you a year of it's called optional practical training after you graduate. If you're doing a STEM degree, I think it's up to 3 years. So I'm going to use my 12 months of OPT to do a few months at an AI research lab, and then my background before coming here, and I assume everyone's given an introduction. In brief, I was working in the government as a competition and regulatory litigator for 3 or 4 years. So for another 6 months after my AI fellowship, I'll be doing a competition law fellowship, researching big tech and how the US attempts to regulate emerging technologies and the big existing tech companies. And then for those final 3 months, yeah, TBD.
Maybe some travel.
Yeah, ideally.
Right. Okay. So I think we've done a lot from the prepared or the pre-submitted questions, but maybe we might open to the audience for those who are able to stick around. We're happy to keep going for a bit longer. If anyone would like to ask a question of anyone who's here tonight, can just come off mute if that's you.
I'll read one from the chat while we wait to see if someone wants to put their hand up to chat. Question for Daniela. Thanks you for sharing your experiences. Do you have any specific application or interview advice that's specific to doctors?
I wouldn't really put myself in a category that anyone else is not in. I think we all just went in there as kind of, representing what we're really passionate about. So my general interview advice, I think, would apply to anyone, which is, again, be really clear about what it is that you have applied for and what you wish to achieve through your studies, and how you can demonstrate leadership and excellence and citizenship. I think it's important to have an idea and read up a bit about John Monash himself, the person the foundation is based upon and in honor of, to understand why those three stems are relevant and important. And I really hate practicing public speaking with people. My poor husband had to listen to me for days and days, but I think practicing, because something that I thought was so clear in my mind, when I tried to get those words out in a short period of time to answer a direct question, I was babbling, fumbling, wasn't able to get to the point clearly. So I think practice, which was long, but it was worth it. And then you also, in that, you get feedback. If you can practice with multiple people, that's great. My lovely housemate also copped some of that. But feedback from people outside your industry as well, to see, is what I'm saying making sense? Because I'm excited about it. I think everyone should know about it, but maybe the way I'm explaining it could be different or could change. So that'd be my main thing. Make sure you know what you're talking about, practice, and read up about John Monash.
Another question. Thanks, Danny. Another question in the chat I haven't got to talks about, there's a few questions about the benefit to Australia, and one specifically is asking, does it need to be specifically Australia, or could it, for example, be helping neighbouring countries given our place in Oceania? Yes, it can. So it doesn't have to be that your benefit is specifically just to Australia and Australians. It's Australia's place in the world as well. So yes, of course, our regional neighbours are very important to Australia, and therefore that would be quite a fine ambition to put in your application.
Taylor, you've got your hand up.
Hi, thank you so much for tonight. It's been very informative. Just a question, and it's just some things that I picked up throughout tonight, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But is there kind of help within the foundation for our applications to these schools? And given how long the application process is some of the programs applications open kind of halfway through the scholarships application process. Do you have any advice on whether or not we should wait until we have an outcome or kind of have a bit more kind of conversations with the foundations before we start the application process to the programs themselves?
I'll answer the first part of your question, and then maybe I'll throw to some of the scholars to see if anyone had any timelines that they needed to consider in particular. Your first question was about help with applications, and yes, we will absolutely help you apply. I've written a number of letters of reference for admissions, any letter to an embassy or the university about just like basic what your funding is, what we're funding, what it's tied to, but also we talk about the I can do a more personal reference as well about the importance of the scholarship and what it means to be a scholar and why that's an important thing for the university. So there's lots of help once you get to that phase as well. But I don't know if any one of the scholars here tonight had any of that conflicting admission schedule where it maybe overlapped when you didn't know if you had the scholarship yet when you were having to submit an application to the university.
I think maybe I had applied for one university at the time before I got the scholarship. And then otherwise, like right after this, I got the scholarship, then I just sort of sent in all the applications and quickly edited like one of the lines to say that I'm coming as a journalist, a drama Monash scholar. But then also I was going to say, depending on what the application process looks like for the program that you're looking at applying for, I can only speak to law, but um, doing the going through the process of applying for the Monash, even not thinking about the interview, just doing the written application, it is pretty full on and makes you like think quite deeply about who you are and why you want to be doing the course that you're doing and what you want to do with your life. And there's sort of very fun, easy questions. And I think that's like the best preparation for actually applying for the universities themselves, because the application for to apply for Columbia or NYU or any of the universities I applied for was so much easier than the application for the Monash scholarship.
Thanks, Nick. And yeah, Taylor, I mean, part of it might just be if there is a conflicting deadline, just get the application in so that you have the option. You'd hate to sort of miss out on an admission opportunity and then get the scholarship and sort of be locked out from that. So, just act like you have it and maybe things will go your way. Thank you for that question. And
Thank
we
you.
have a question here about interviews as well. So yes, beyond actually the application, you may be invited to one or two interviews as well as part of this process. And they do have slightly different structures. And certainly in preparation for the second interview, so the final national round, I coach everyone. I give you your feedback from the first interview so you can learn from that. And we talk a little bit about the structure of the second, in which you provide a presentation to the panel, and we talk about how you might frame that. But there's not that sort of similar service or advice for the first round of interviews. So I was wondering, of the scholars, how did you go about preparing for the unknown? I suppose there's some known information. We tell you who will be interviewing you, but then there's a lot of unknowns. So maybe Nick, since we've woken you up, squeeze the most out of you in terms of answers.
Very happy to. And I'll also say I'll put something in the chat with my email, but very happy to chat to anyone offline as well about the scholarship and studying overseas, given I arrived so late. But yeah, I think the best advice I can give for the first interview and also the second interview is to obviously be yourself, be authentic, all of that, but also be authentic in the way that you prepare. I'm sure this isn't the first time you've spoken to people you've never met before, and probably not the first time you've ever had to interview for something. So prepare for it the way you would any other interview. So I think in one of these seminars a few years ago, I can't remember who, but one of the scholars said that she prepared like maybe like 1,000 flashcards or like 1,000 fake interview questions. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh my gosh, I could not do that. And I didn't do that because that's not how I would go about preparing for an interview. I'd much rather sort of speak off the cuff and ramble in the way that you can see that I do. So I think if like over preparing isn't your style, then doing that for the first time in an interview that might determine whether you can go and study overseas and help put you on your life trajectory might not be the best idea. On the other hand, if over preparing is the way that you go about these things, then going in blind and just shooting from the hip might not be the best tactic.
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Nick. And maybe Max, I'm interested to hear from you about interview prep or even what your memories are of your interview experience.
Yeah, I am a very nervous interviewer. I was pretty terrified going into the interviews, but I think my main takeaway from the experience is just that, as I'm sure you will have gathered hearing about what Lauren does in giving your feedback and letting you know about different pointers from, say, the state round interview, is that the John Monash Foundation is really here to see you succeed. So it's not that these interviews is like a boiling pot and they throw everybody in and they see who sort of survives. They really, what I was so struck by was that everybody was there and they were really interested in what I had to say and they wanted to build me up. And the questions were designed to bring out the best in me and really encourage me to share my strengths and what I'm passionate about. And so I guess in terms of interview prep, I was just stuck to the bread and butter. I understood what general types of questions I could be expected to answer, and I just tried to prepare, say, three different anecdotes or examples of experiences or events that I could sort of um, siphon into each of those categories. So I felt prepared that with a fairly broad variety of different questions, I had some examples ready to go that I could plug and play. So I guess I did do a little bit of prep in building up that bank of just anecdotes, and that, of course, being able to present them too. A lot of practice with mainly family members in with some scripted questions and things.
Thanks, Max. I don't know, Danny or Hamish, if there was any other unique interview prep or not prep that you did.
I remember leaving the interview after the first round, and I think I actually said the words, "Wow, is that over? I really enjoyed that. Must it end now?" I completely want to reiterate what Max said. It didn't feel like an interrogation or I want to find some way how, to catch people out. Like, it was really a genuinely positive experience. And I remember leaving that first interview thinking, wow, if I don't progress to the next one, that was excellent. I've like had a great chat with people. I got to talk about something I love about. I got to practice how to be more professional in my presentation with this. And I honestly just felt really wonderful leaving. And then the feedback we got after the first round, I found really, really helpful in structuring and adapting some of the questions and the responses for the second round. I think my overall realization in practicing was that I rambled too much. And so I found it timing my responses, even though I'd maybe speak a bit off the cuff, actually recognizing how long it took for me to say something was really, really helpful. And I found that a really useful reflection tool as well.
Thanks, Danny. Hamish?
I really liked Nick's point about being authentic in the way you prepare. Yeah, don't change your process up for this. It is a really intense but enjoyable conversation that you have. There are no trick questions. The two things that I would say are be really across your own application and what you've written, because there might be little things you've mentioned in there, and you're so in your mind focused on talking about what you want to study and why and your vision, and then something from 10 years ago that you mentioned briefly in your application might come up, and you need to be prepared to speak on that, to be across your own application, and also be across like the most recent developments in your field. And not only will that set you up for success if questions arise about your field, but it also will increase your confidence, and you will walk in there feeling like it's not just internalized, but you're really across what's going on outside as well. And yeah, it just provides a good balance to your prep as well, I think.
Thanks, guys. And I don't know if anyone in the audience, if you'd like to ask a question, you can just pop your hand up like Taylor did before. But otherwise, Karen, were there any other questions that you've seen or come across in the chat that we could ask on behalf of?
Yeah, I think I've answered most of them, or there were some duplicates, or we sort of took them offline. I have put Lauren's email at the bottom of the chat for any questions you that we've missed, or if you or you haven't had a chance, or we missed it in the chat, or you haven't had a chance to ask it yet. There was a few people asking about the type of people to pick for referees, and particularly if someone is a family member, not nuclear family, but someone in your family. Not sure we've had that before. My thought on this one was what someone sort of said, for example, a great uncle. I think that person's probably far enough removed um, that they sort of not, they're not in your nuclear family, and it's not just sort of like your mum saying how great you are. But I think ideally you want to call that out ask them to write in their letter why they feel that they are best placed to speak to whatever it is you've asked them to be a referee for. If it's, to your character traits, it's to your ambitions and your impact, or what you're doing in the community currently. So there should be a rationale rather than just, oh, it's a family member who'll say something really nice about me. So if you're using family members, there are sort of distant family members, but my advice would be, make sure it's clear why that person has been asked why they're best placed to be a referee rather than someone else. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. I think Kriti has their hand up.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Mine's a question also about the referees. How much does if you're picking people in your field or people that know you relatively well, how much does the seniority or position of that referee come into play? Especially if it's sort of like a professional reference, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if you can choose the most senior person, but that can still speak to who you are, and can talk about relevant things that you're going to be writing in your application. I think we talked about maybe in the last webinar that if or a different webinar, if you have to give someone your resume to remind them who you are, maybe that's not the best person to be writing a reference for you, because they should know you quite well. But I'd still, like, if you had a choice of two people and one was more senior than the other, but they still knew you quite well, the seniority I would pick. So I hope that answered that question. But just going on from that, Nick, we were talking earlier in the piece about who the scholars were choosing when they were considering their referees. So I don't know if you remember who you asked and why you asked, but I think that sort of, the more that we can share that, I think the more people understand how to put their referees together. So do you remember who was in your application?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had at the time I was working, I had worked as a solicitor for a few years, and at the time I applied, I was working for a judge. So I had my judge as one. I had my former like partner equivalent at the government solicitor, and then I had a professor who I both studied under at law school and also worked with as a research assistant and then as a co-author. So I thought all three of those people would people that would be able to speak to my like personal values as well as my capacity to study overseas, or to just to study at a postgraduate level and to contribute to Australia. The only other thing I would say, maybe two things about referees is I've spoken to a few people that are applying and who are concerned about who to pick. I think if your instinct is that this person, this professor or this, judge or whoever it might be, would be very surprised to be hearing from you. You know, if it's a professor that you haven't had any contact with since your first year of undergrad, maybe reconsider whether they're going to be able to like speak to you to the level that the Monash reviewing panels would expect. And then also, if you're choosing between, I think Lauren spoke to this, but say you're a lawyer at a firm and you're choosing between a partner who has really good like global name recognition within the field, or your senior associate that you do a lot of like direct work for, and the partner like doesn't really know who you are beyond a name at the end of an email every now and then, I would go for the senior associate because at the end of the day, the person reviewing your application is going to look beyond the name and not care that you've got, you know, uh, Anthony Albanese signing off on a referee letter if all that the PM's saying is that this person volunteered at my Grandler electoral office.
Yeah, great point, Nick. So, Kriti, I hope that has answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I think, unless Karen, there's anything else.
There's just one quick one. I'm typing an answer, but someone else has thumbed up it as well. It's
Okay.
about the WAM and
Mhm.
what range is competitive.
Mhm.
So I've started. We can just chat about this for a second, but I've started writing. The WAM firstly it needs to be high enough to get you into the university that you want to go to. So noting some of these universities are really hard to get into, and your grades will be a large part of what determines your admission. But also one of our 3 selection criteria is your academic excellence. So when people see that, we do get applications from people with very strong grades. So it is very competitive in that area. There's no magic number where we draw the WAM and say, below this, we won't look at your application. But just think about those 2 things. What we are selecting for academic excellence, there's an expectation that you do have high marks. You will be competing against people that have high marks, and you do need to be able to get into a university. So you can use some of those as a guide as well. What universities are looking for in terms of academic grading to get into some of those courses.
Yeah. And what I'll say as well is if you maybe meet the entry requirements of a particular university, but maybe you feel that there are still stronger grades out there than yours. We also think that excellence can be demonstrated in a number of different ways, and it's not just WAM on a paper. So it really is that assessing yourself against the program that you'd like to get into, because getting the scholarship won't get you over any admissions hurdles that's required of the university. So if Oxford is a great example. I think they're pretty transparent about the minimum WAM that they consider. If you don't have that, just having a John Monash scholarship won't change the admissions outcome there. So there is no magic number, unfortunately, but I hope we've given you some context for that. And then maybe Sam, you've got your
Lauren,
hand
sorry,
up. Oh yeah,
can I
Nick.
add to the WAM point? Obviously, every course is different, and an 80 WAM in law might be equivalent to like a 92 WAM in science from a particular university. It also obviously varies from university to university. I think UQ does GPA. I don't know what that means. So it is all very like course and university dependent. So if you can also get like a letter or something from the university that you've graduated from saying that you're in the top X% of your graduating cohort, that would also be something useful to put in your application, and then also when you're applying for the universities as well.
Yeah, big tip, Nick. Sam, I think you've got your hand up, so happy for you to ask a question, and we might finish on Sam's question since we're at 7:30.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody, and apologies for dragging this on. But this hasn't been touched on yet. I asked about particular work experience and potential internships that one might want to do adjacent to their scholarship. A lot of scholars might choose universities in Europe or the US because of their vicinity to some big international organizations. And I was wondering if it's worth mentioning that kind of opportunity or intention to pursue some internships within your application.
Yeah, I'll answer this and then I might open to the scholars as well. I think that is a great thing to include, Sam, about why you've chosen a particular university is its proximity to something like an internship that you feel would be not only an incredible learning opportunity, but something to put on your resume that sort of springboards you to where you're wanting to go. Just checking off the usual things that the student visa for that particular country would allow you to undertake that. I'm going to use Oxford as an example again, sorry, but only because we've come across a situation before where a particular college that a scholar was residing at while they were studying at Oxford did not allow students who were residents to undertake work. So just being sort of careful of those more administrative things about undertaking work while study or undertaking work after study. But I don't know if any of the scholars on the call, maybe had mentioned something similar in their application, or maybe even if you didn't, if that has come up since, that there's someone or a group or a workplace nearby that would contribute nicely to the study that you're undertaking.
I can speak to that. So the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine is currently the host of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Climate Change and Sustainability. So that was a huge part of my application to say not only will I be able to undertake this coursework that sounds incredibly interesting, but it's with people who are leading professors, researchers, policymakers in this really important field. And so the ability to meet these people, work with these people was a huge part of my choice for university and my application. And I outlined that in my application. So, yeah.
Thanks, Danny. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can also briefly speak to part of the reason I wanted to study in the Europe region is because of proximity to different conferences for physics and also proximity to the different leaders in the field. So I understood where the different people who are regarded as leading in different types of technology, where they sit in the geographically there. And so I wanted to study somewhere where I can sort of try and arrange to meet or visit their different institutions and labs. So that was something that I mentioned in my application.
Thanks, Max. So, Sam, I hope that has answered your question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there in terms of Q&A. Thank you to everyone who joined us live tonight. If we didn't get to your question in the chat, I think one or two have come in. Just send me an email. I'm happy to take as many questions offline as I can, especially while we still have lots of time before the application deadline. So if we didn't get to you, please reach out there and maybe I can give you personalized advice as well. So from now, I did calculate that there are 26 days left to submit your application. So don't be leaving it to the last minute. If you're experiencing any issues, particularly with referees, either reach out to my email address or you can provide them with that email address as well and I can help them and I can check a lot of things in the back end if you're experiencing issues. Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, can I add one more thing?
Yes.
I know I'm rambling. On the point of making sure you don't apply at the last minute, I think I applied with like 15 minutes to go and the portal was not working for me because one of my referees, who is a tech scholar, was having issues with her technology. So I think I got in touch with the admin team at the Monash who were very helpful, but don't put yourself and don't put them in that position. So definitely do not apply on the last day. That was very uncharacteristic and very inauthentic for me. So apply earlier.
Thank you. Yes, great example. Even if we do the warning that don't leave it to last minute, it is the last minute is usually when we have the bulk of the applications, which means things run slower. sites don't load, buttons don't click, and it's very hard to provide IT support sort of in that final hour. So, if you can, if the 30th of June is a Monday, I believe. So if you can do it on the Sunday at least, then we've got all day to help you on Monday if something goes wrong. So thanks for that example. So thank you to all the scholars who joined us tonight. Thank you, Karen, for helping me as well. And thank you to everyone else as well. So good luck with your application, and I look forward to receiving them.